And welcome everybody to another episode, Series 4, Episode 6 of State of the Onion. And this is, I'm calling this one, I've got an exotic name for it for some reason. It's actually Rex's triage argument. And what should I call it? An examination of re-examinations, examination results and arguments for a Christian God by State of the Onion. Welcome to everybody to the State of the Onion, those that haven't been here. Yeah, basically it's let me just say hi to Mike, hi to Hizzle, and hi to Robin, of course, who's here. I'll introduce the panel in a second. Mike, what we're doing is we're just going to go through this argument, which is pure syllogisms and pure philosophy, for a little while, and then once we get through the bulk of it, maybe when we get to the atheism part, we'll go on. And oh, hello, Spooky, thank you very much. Yeah, I am now clean shaved. We've had a heat wave, and it was too much for me. Thank you, Hizzle. Yeah, okay. DM me on my OnlyFans. Okay. Hizzle says looks good. Nice, nice. You know you love philosophy, Mike. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's cool. Don't worry about that. Okay, so let's get the syllogism up to start with. I do want to try and get into it. So where did I put that? I put that here. No, I didn't. Put that here. There it is. Actually, let's do it another way. Excuse me a second, people. I will be right with you. If you want to just introduce yourselves, that would be fine. While I'm doing this and trying to get it all sorted.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Robin.
Thank you.
Most of y'all know me. My credentials are a professional truck driver and woman, so like part-time know-it-all. So that yeah. So and yeah.
True that.
Oh no, that's wrong.
Who's next? Thomas?
All right. I'm Thomas. I work for the Pangburn YouTube, and I have a bachelor's in computer science with a minor in physics, and I have been an autodidact like Simos for a long time.
I'm Kurt. I am a practicing physician. I have some experience with actual triage, but not as much with this argument, although I have talked about it briefly with Rex. And I don't have a professional background in philosophy, but my dad did teach philosophy, so I got a lot of ideas about it when I was growing up.
Fantastic.
I'm Robert. I host the channel Skeptic Philosophy. Some of y'all popping in here have probably seen me around to a few different channels and whatnot. I have no academic accolades in this particular field or anything relative to it, but I have been reading philosophy and interested in the subject for quite a while. I have read this syllogism just today, unfortunately, and it's quite a doozy.
Okay, I'm struggling to...
I just want to add that I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night too. So.
And that's all it takes.
That's it.
You can understand Kant the morning you wake up after a Holiday Inn Express at night.
Potentially. I'm trying to find the right version. I saved a version into an easy...
Is this the text file you sent me? I could send it back.
Yeah, I was hoping to get it into a different file format, and I didn't. So I'm going to just use the Discord one. New whole file. There we go. Okay. No, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. Okay, if I just do this and then... So long. He's put so much work into this. This is re-examination, by the way. I did put a an at Rex's YouTube thing, so you can just type that in if you want. Let's just copy that, and then if I start up a rich text document,
I have it in a text file. I just put it in so that I can read it while we're kind of going down.
Yeah, no, I've got it here. I've got it here now. Okay, and then so long it's just not even doing that for me. Okay, here we go. This is good. And then
I mean, it describes itself as a strong philosophical argument and abbreviates that SPA. So I feel like we're going to have an afternoon at the SPA.
okay. Right, let me try this then. No, that's the wrong thing.
Actually, afternoon for me, probably not afternoon for anyone else.
I'm just here to learn what on atheism's own terms means in the syllogism.
What? On the terms of there being no God.
Application window, bang, that one, share. Okay. Hopefully that's come up.
And there's SPA right there.
Okay, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna
there you
put
go.
it-
That's what I was going to say. Can you zoom on it
I'm
or
going
something?
to put it over there.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Right. I think we're ready to start now. Is everybody all right in?
Yep.
All right. Hello, Doubting Thomas. Good to see you. Let me just get through any more hellos. Mike says, if you is from Ort, I'm going to report this video. I expected more professionalism. Okay. Yeah, more pity you. I hope you meet the right woman someday. Okay. Let me yeah, that way. Right. Thank you. So this is the triage argument from Rex. He very kindly sent me this. We're going to try and get through it as quick as possible, but not so quick that we get it all wrong. So refined, recalibrated, fully updated, all refinements incorporated. So that's nice. Triage, the complete
Lovely.
system. I can't remember what
He's a
triage stands
lyricist.
for, but yeah, he is actually. Yeah, he plays some mean guitar. Oh no, I need to do it on this screen here. So NT, near transcendental. Every detail instantiates the conclusion.
I think it says denial.
Denial. Oh, every denial instantiates the conclusion. Right. I think
Yeah.
that makes it proof by contradiction, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. SPA. Okay, which is nothing to do with Formula One for you fans out there. Strong philosophical argument, although I'm not sure. Genuine force from definitions and analysis. Contains substantive premises that face live objections, but none successfully answered.
I just want to point out that the argument as it is structured uses a whole lot of intensifying and minimizing adjectives in front of the nouns. There's a lot of mere and simply and just, and also a lot of genuine and real and fundamental and all of that. And most of those remain undefined.
Booster words.
Okay.
Booster definitions.
Yeah. Yeah. So genuine force from definitions. Does anybody know what a genuine force from a definition would be?
Well, the definition is a tautological statement, so yeah, I guess that would make it genuine,
right?
As opposed to ersatz.
Use rather than meaning. I would say Wittgenstein might have something to say about that sentence. Anyway, and analysis contains substantive premises that face live objections, but none successfully answered. Live objections, but none successfully answered.
It's a bit question begging, but like
yeah. I'm not exactly sure what his intention is with this one. I don't know that I've seen it in any of the arguments later.
Okay. Distinguish from
to say that I've made an argument and nobody's successfully answered my argument sort of is what everybody thinks when they're making an argument, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're here to do. So you're right. I guess it is begging the question in that sense. Anyway, distinguish from analytic, which implies conclusion follows from definitions alone without contest. Okay, I see. So if it's not analytic, he's saying it's synthetic. Is that right?
No, he's drawing it from evidence by the way he's describing the end of that sentence there. Yes, there's evidence to support that comes from something other than the definition itself.
Okay, good. Okay, I misunderstood. That's fantastic. Okay, CA, compelling abductive. Best available explanations among named alternatives, more parsimonious than explanatory adequate, not deductively necessary. Okay, but didn't we just say it was near transcendental? Every dinar instantiates the conclusion.
I think this is like a
the word
glossary. So he's
every.
gonna put these determinations on his statements to tell us how
Yes, he does.
firm he is on them. So if it
Yeah.
says NT, he's gonna be basically saying, I know this is not deductive, but
Gotcha.
boy, is it close.
Okay,
And
I've
then
got you.
spa is below that, and ka is below that, and then gup and rut are the weakest he's got.
Right, genuine. So gut, GP, genuine pressure, real philosophical force against named alternatives, does not formally close every version. Okay, that's good. And then RT, remaining task, genuine philosophical work not yet completed to this standard, named honestly, which is appreciated for sure. Appreciated. Okay.
So if we
Argument
see an
one.
argument with RT, we can just dig in and he won't even be upset.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that will be helping him in effect. Okay, so argument one, secular speed run. Argument two, transcendental core. Stage one argument, the transcendental core. Stage 1.1, the master observation NT. Okay, so that's I guess that's the conclusion, really. Or I suppose they're all conclusions. Okay, so we're going to start at argument one, I guess. P1, any philosophical position, to be a position rather than a noise, must simply deploy, laugh out loud. This
I think
position
it's
is a specific thing.
simultaneously.
LOL,
No, that's the law of
logic.
You said simply, but it must
I
simultaneously.
guess that's the
Oh, yeah.
LOL is the law
Pardon.
of logic.
Thank you. Yeah.
LONC is law of non-contradiction.
Okay, let me say
LOI
this
is the
then.
law of identity.
That's
Law
what
of
it is.
identity.
LOI. That's exactly what it is.
Okay, great. Any philosophical position, to be a position rather than noise, must simultaneously, thank you very much, deploy the law of identity. This position is this specific thing. Law of non-contradiction. This position is not not its contrary. And NBF. This is correct. You ought to recognize it. You ought to recognize it. Failure is genuine epistemic error, not mere preference. So that NBF stands for normative binding force.
Binding force. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which I'm a little unclear about it, but he's defined it here as this is correct, right? You ought to recognize it.
Oh my!
Hey, he
Failure
did it.
is.
He did it. He got an alt
Poor
from an
Mike,
is right
he
out
got
the
it
gate.
right away on page 2.
Yeah, there we go. This failure is a genuine epistemic error, not mere preference. Okay, so we may have a problem with NBF. Okay, being that it breaks Hume.
I'm still not sure where genuine matters here. Like, what are the ersatz epistemic errors or the pseudo epistemic errors?
Okay, yeah, that's true. And then P2, without NBF, normative binding force, a position is not an argument. It is a conditional carrying no normative claim on anyone's assent. This point I want to carry out. So this kind of is making normative distinctive, right? Which means that I guess he told me at one point when I was talking to him that he'd like me to define the fact that a normative is that he's equivocating on the word normative. And yeah, okay, I've now grant that I'm not necessarily equivocating with you on the meaning of normative there. However, you're saying you're then now associating it with NBF. Without NBF, a position is not an argument, is carrying no normative claim on anyone's assent, which I don't think follows. So it's the binding force part, which I'm kind of thinking that you're including with this normative definition of mine, which I would disagree with. And I think if you say it's a binding force, and that it carries is a conditional carrying no normative claim on anyone's assent,
I think he does try to determine what counts as binding later. So
Okay.
I
Right.
think
Okay.
he does.
Thank you for that. Right. Thank you. So the conclusion, therefore, is every philosophical position already uses what triage analyzes before the argument begins. The entry point is not a premise to accept or decline. It is the structure of the activity of arguing at all, which sounds extremely like transcendental. Anybody want to comment on that?
It surely does rhyme.
Well, it rhymes. There you go.
Okay, so honest note. So this is, I guess, one of the things which could be improved upon. Establishing that normative binding force is in use does not itself establish what grounds the normative binding force has, presumably, the remaining syllogisms that do work. Let me read that again because that didn't make sense to me in my head. Honest note,
Syllogisms are deductive, right?
yeah, they are.
Okay.
I mean, is there a deductive syllogism in the is there a syllogism in the inductive argument? So all observed A's are B's, therefore all B's all A's are B's.
So this first thing, like this is not a syllogism. The conclusion is not present in premise 2 or premise 1.
Right. So every philosopher already uses triage before the argument begins. Yeah, okay, that's true.
He introduces the term triage in the conclusion of a syllogism that doesn't have it in it. So if this is presented as a premise conclusion, but for me it's just like a nice intro to try to show what he's going to try to demonstrate. I think that's fine.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Also, although he's put it P1, so there should be
he calls it an observation.
There should be a P0, which is his first argument that he's going to give here, which is the transcendental.
This should have been at the end of it.
Oh, look, stage 1. Okay, so look, it's stage 1, right? So he's presumably this is S1.1. So he's saying, look, there's a bit before this, which is transcendental, and that's what triage is going to be. I guess that's what he's saying. But then you could have just put it in as P0, right? And given the transcendental argument for triage, said that, but I guess we.
I don't know why those needed P1, P2 in conclusion, because I think they would have just worked fine as paragraphs. But they're certainly not a syllogism, at least the way they're currently written. They might be improvable to be one.
Yeah, I mean, could we make one out of those two?
I mean, premise 1 is noisy. It's got a lot.
It's got a lot, that's for sure. But I mean, there's two parts to it, isn't there? Because these two are really the same thing, right? It's if
I mean, any philosophical position must employ law of identity and law of non-contradiction, and that would just be like that would be it. You wouldn't all throw in all this like yammering afterwards.
MBF,
and then premise 2 would be without the law of identity and law of non-contradiction, a position can't carry normative force, and then therefore every philosophical position that lacks law of identity and law of non-contradiction does not carry normative force, I guess would be the way to describe the conclusion.
Yeah, or that's the conclusion, really. So P1, P2, failure is without that force, without MBF, MBF is a failure in genuine epistemic error. It is. You don't even need failure. MBF is genuine epistemic error, not mere preference.
Interesting.
I mean, saying it's mere preference, I think also that's kind of begging the question as well.
Fallacy of the excluded middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, also, like, when you say it's an abductive argument and you're using, I suppose that's okay. This position is not its contrary. I mean, that's kind of implying necessity, isn't it?
Again, there are multiple ways that we establish non-arbitrary fact finders that are just done by convention without any external normative binding force. I would use international borders, for example.
Right.
And
Okay.
there are pragmatists that would obviously argue that the only pragmatism is why we would accept a proposition that's your only ought that drives it. So
Oh, I
the
see.
idea,
Yeah.
the idea that it's a failure when that would imply that there's a goal that's set on that, and people who are purely pragmatist would not like that premise.
Okay, so I think that this is the case. So he's calling this NT, which means needs work. So I think all of that is going to be helpful to him to understanding why we're not really that happy with this as a logical argument. So the main critiques here are, the conclusion is invalid because the conclusion is not in the premise. So that immediately shows it's invalid as an argument. And then also there's some little quirks here to say things like what you just said, and then this really needs to be made into a sub-argument so you can show that MBF is a genuine epistemic preference, although there's still issues with that as well. And then you can go into this and make this, you could potentially put this as like a conclusion 1, then give what follows from that is if it's transcendental. If it's a transcendental, then triage follows. And
it's a little troublesome to think I got this far in my life and was never able to actually have a justification for all the claims I made until now.
Okay.
I have this wonderful argument. I can just like trot it out anytime somebody says, no, I don't like that. And I can say, what normative binding force do you have for that?
Yeah. I'm not.
That's not an argument.
I'm just not keen on the force. I'm just not keen on this normative.
Have you looked into NBF, Simon?
Feel the
I
normative
haven't,
binding,
no.
Luke. Feel it.
I haven't, Thomas. Well, what would you say about MBF?
Well, NBF is a higher order concern in metanormativity, one of the fields underneath, meta ethics and ethics and all these things. In turn, everybody knows what normativity is here, I assume. And so then, NBF is basically just like it's what metanormativity is attempting to find out. It's how these syllogisms, propositions, things like that have their alleged authority over us. Why we generally ought to conform rather than just can or prefer to do something. And so, NBF is what they would call an explanandum. Metanormativity evaluates competing explanations, which are explanandums. So, establishing NBF does not, yet establish a source for God or anything like that, but it is extremely important in metanormativity, especially with its relation to epistemic standards like justification, truth, and belief in JTB. So it is very important. Normative binding force is something, in academic philosophy is argued about a lot, and it's used in a lot of different syllogistic arguments, and it's something that is a thing. It's very much a thing.
Okay. So does it have its own justification, or it's just a definitional thing?
That's the interesting thing, because you are literally, so NBF is the alleged binding authority that we're trying to explain, right? It's and in this triage argument, it's attempting to explain itself. And so metanormativity, the field asks what that bindingness consists in and what force it has in terms of epistemics and what grounds it metaphysically.
Right. Okay. So what grounds it metaphysically? Okay. So we're going to be looking for that explanation at some point, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay,
here's
thank
the issue I have with React's argument is that he equivocates between epistemic normativity and the moral normativity, like what he calls objective moral normativity. So, like, I don't think that I don't think that there is that's a misstep, because just because there are, like, if you have objective like epistemic norms, that does not entail objective moral norms. Like, I just don't think that he makes that connection. And he likes to jump back and forth between them, like at a time when he likes to like mash them together, and so that, like, and he's done this to me, like, personally. He'll be like, if you value, I should value truth, you're making a moral claim on me, and and I don't think epistemic oughts are moral oughts. Like I think that, and I think that he's like he likes to jump back and forth with those two things.
Okay.
Well, just about every epistemic ought can be converted into a hypothetical imperative, right? So if you want to X, then you will Y is this very standard hypothetical imperative form that people use literally all the time.
But it's relational. It's relational to the desired outcome.
It arises from the fact that two individuals or even one individual within themselves, because people do actually have like akrasia and like second order desires and first order desires, the hypothetical imperative will be a coordinating principle whenever there are like competing wishes.
Okay. Yeah. So that, oh wait, he's already got it. Here we go. Okay, well, let's just move on to the S1.2, the consumption extension. Again, NT, so needs testing is what I'm completing that as.
All right.
New extends
like
from atheism self-definition to all intelligible distinction. We'll find out what that means shortly, I guess.
Wait. Atheism self-definition.
Yeah, to all intelligible.
Where did atheism grow up that he thought he could give everybody else the definition? Because like I think of it.
I told y'all like this is my biggest concern about the whole thing earlier.
Okay.
Like this is
Yeah,
this is what I need to know.
We'll get there. So if atheism cannot ground the normative binding force, it cannot ground normative obligation to maintain any categorical distinction whatsoever. So first of all, Thomas, maybe you could explain the difference between hypothetical
the
and
way that
categorical.
this starts at the meta level is it's a fancy way of explaining that rational discourse and analysis employs epistemic standards. That is entirely plausible and very much in line with philosophical thinking, and it is philosophically important. The next bridge goes to those standards, all of them, possess normative binding force. That is possible and most likely true in many cases, but the document compresses several different notions into his form of NBF, and that's the issue. That's where we're starting from.
Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I completely agree that like the shared standards are critical, but I just fail to see how shared standards are going to ever come from anything other than collective hypothetical imperatives. And I would say even again, the rules of discourse that are being done within the English language are coming from shared hypothetical imperatives because English language is constructed from shared hypothetical imperatives.
What he's arguing is that all of those, the hypothetical imperatives and everything, are standards. They're standardized norms. They may be agreed upon, they may be testable, and plausibility is involved, but those are standards, and that is what the meta layer is hitting. The problem is that we can't show everything is that way, and this argument is very attempting to be completely deductive and claim necessity, modality-wise.
Good, okay.
Yeah, but again, like if atheism is going to hold the second word in your like premise, you should define it somewhere.
It is fancily dancing.
I don't think he's really attacking atheism. I think he's attacking naturalism in this. He should have probably said if naturalism cannot ground, would have probably been the better wording here, if I had to guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense as well, because the first thing that came to my mind is atheism is just a claim that there isn't a God, but it's not a positive claim in that sense. But no, that makes sense. Set up MD as some kind of ontological essence. Yeah, I guess so, Mike. That makes sense.
I would make a parallel distinction that on many versions of theism, there simply cannot be normative binding force because you cannot predict the future.
Yeah, the way that this reads, if you think if atheism is supposed to be a stand-in for not God models, it would look like if not God models cannot ground NBF, it cannot ground the normative obligations to maintain any categorical distinction. And I guess that's what he was trying to go for.
It seems
Yes.
as though he is attempting to use atheism as a point here, but atheism is not a complete metaphysical or metaethical theory. We're speaking above
It's not.
the meta layer of atheism. So
Atheists hold to so many different philosophical positions.
indeed.
Really difficult to like ascribe even one to it. Certainly not all atheists are naturalists. That's a certainty. But I'm going to go further. I'm going to say on theism. Last Tuesdayism is a live option, and the idea that the universe can end. The whole universe could end, and then you could become a solipsistic continuation of the universe by yourself as God becomes this massive Cartesian demon. Those are all live options. So how am I getting any NBF from that?
Yeah, radical skepticism does throw some wrenches into the absolute meta layer, metaphysical arguments that are being given here. So radical skepticism is not to be. I love the Bertrand Russell, Russellian 5-minute argument. All your memories and everything came into existence 5 minutes ago, and you'd never know the difference, kind of thing. So,
right. And I've had young Earth creationists argue that is the fact of the matter, that the Earth looks like it's 4.7 billion years old, but it was actually created 6,000 years ago. And that is a live opinion for them. But for me, that's like, okay, no specific fact that I discern can ever be known in that way. Then.
Yeah, Stephen Anderson holds to that. Actually.
Yeah. Okay, so that's P1. Oh, great. On P2, I just want to say actually about you saying
we're going to get
Robert,
through this whole thing really quickly, aren't we, Simos?
Yeah. There may be a part 2, people. Okay, so yeah, basically, I did question him on that on his last argument, exactly that question, and I brought up an objection about trying to, whatever impossibility by the contrary. Impossibility of the contrary being his justification, and then he said, well, and then they're not world God view, and I said, okay, well now it's a dichotomy, so but you've got no way of doing X, Y, Z, right? He actually said something like it's a negative. Well, atheism is a negative belief, so how can you base anything on a negative belief? And he was making the same mistake. I think he was making the same mistake there, as saying. Well, because atheism is not a positive belief, therefore it can't ground anything, right? Which I would say fair enough, other than one's own psychological state of non-belief. That's about the only thing it could ground. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the non-God worldview, the non-theism worldview, as I would call it, and that is all the worldviews, including agnosticism, and all of the positive worldviews that any atheist could potentially hold. Right?
So he could have said no.
Those are positive beliefs. Go ahead. Sorry.
It could have said, to been more clear on this, no worldview absent God can ground the NBF.
Yeah. Okay. Go.
But then he'd have to choose between polytheism and monotheism, which would be interesting. Yeah. I'd like to see what he would do there. But my point is, again, ground is completely undefined here. And I have to admit, I have yet to hear an explanation of grounding that does not actually just mean explanation. And I have a personal opinion that the value of an explanation is that it exhausts the listener's patience with objection. In other words, a good explanation is one that the person you're explaining something to then stops asking questions after. And other than that, no explanation is considered adequate by the person who continues to ask questions. And that's not a statement about the truth of the argument. That's a statement about the patience of the listener.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, that's great. Go ahead. Anybody else got something to say?
I mean, just in general, contemporary scholarship treats the normativity of logic and belief as an actual live problem. It recognizes, multiple realist and constructivist accounts, constitutive, I can't even say that word rightly. Constituent accounts, and different, like Robert said, naturalistic accounts. So there's many different, and this is a thing, but it is not an analytic shortcut to God deductively. That is the biggest thing here, is that overall the meta layer is saying, yeah, sure, okay, logic and belief in terms of their normativity and metanormativity. That's a live problem. So now I'm going to go exactly from that abductively. And that's where we fall into problems, because the entirety of this argument is attempting to claim necessity. And that is an issue when we're speaking about these kind of normative forces. So.
Yeah, I don't see where it's making the statement. If we're to translate this, if all non-God models cannot ground NBF, it cannot. So I don't think any God models, in some sense, can ground NBF. I mean, if it's saying it's grounded in the NBF.
There is no, evidential or philosophical reasoning or deductive syllogism that says any type of normativity needs an ultimate grounding. That is one of the major problems with any argument that is attempting a transcendental proof.
Yeah. One of, yeah. Okay, let's move on to P2. So again, I just want to say this is NT as well. Okay, needs testing. So I can't remember what NT stands for now, but
near transcendent.
Near transcendent. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh, I thought this was the last one where he said, I don't know.
Near transcendent.
RT.
Oh, RT. Okay, near transcendent. Right. Okay. Well, no wonder we're coming up with these, objections then. I mean, I don't know what the difference between near transcendent and transcendent is.
It's transcendental-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
Asymptotic to transcendence. It's like it's on a parabolic curve that's going to almost hit the Cartesian coordinate, but
never actually gets there. Okay, so it's not transcendental.
Yeah, it's ish. It's ish.
Okay.
Near means not. Sure, absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
We're getting to my favorite one, y'all. Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, this one is amazing.
Okay. So look, we're going to kind of say on atheism's own terms, this might mean all not atheism or all non-Christian God worldviews.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. right. Okay.
Let's put it that way. So it just includes all of like Islam and polytheism and Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, pantheism, as well as
Shinto. You gotta give Shinto their props.
Oh yeah, I love a bit of Shinto.
All not my Jesus views.
A good Irish sport. And then, sorry, I'm making myself laugh now. And then also naturalism and trivialism and dialetheism.
Now, I find this very curious, but I wonder what his opinion would be of pantheism, deism, and panentheism, because for me, like they're.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so on atheism's own terms, following the collapse simultaneously into mere convention, the distinction between imagination and empirical data. Yeah, okay. I mean, naturalism certainly has or empiricism has an answer to that. Distinction between health and disease. Well, Sam Harris uses that as a good.
These aren't even the same thing.
Analogy.
There aren't even antithesis.
Terrible. That one is terrible.
Go ahead.
So we have like very, very loads, like huge amounts of theory in nosology, right? So nosological principles are primarily and generally derived from statistical norms. So a statistically normal result will usually, if it's like representative of population, be considered healthy. But not always, because Dahl's famous paper on the distinction between sick individuals and sick populations did identify there were circumstances where the statistical norms couldn't be used, not because they weren't statistical norms, but because that population was highly susceptible to a morbidity associated with their statistical norms. And the classic example of this would be, imagine a population where everybody smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day, right? Their lung cancer rates would be normal for them, but they wouldn't be normal. So what we generally use are the statistical norms, all things held equal, until we have evidence of a hypothetical imperative that we wish to avoid, right? And then we look for a biological difference between the group that's protected and the group that has the exposure and is getting the disease. So the classic on this was scrotal cancer in London and chimney sweeps back in the 19th century. And as you know from all your friends who've never had scrotal cancer, unless you're a chimney sweep boy who has to go into a chimney and scrape out all the ash while you're naked, because that's how they did it, your scrotum is pretty safe from getting cancer. But that particular job with those particular employees led to cancer of the scrotum. And that distinction was easy to tell because cancer of the scrotum was otherwise unheard of. And so we can easily, like through just basic interaction with people and the hypothetical imperative that people don't want to have tumors growing out of their skin, determine the difference between health and disease in many, many cases. And then we can use that to generalize a database of nosological principles such that now, if there's a cancer that we've never seen before ever, and it develops and it has the characteristics of the cancer, we can already identify it as a cancer. And we can understand how it's going to work and like general principles of how to deal with it without any like word from above or any like non-statistical, non-observational source for that nosological criterion. Now, the big argument back in the day, and this is largely resolved in favor of the nosological criterion, was whether obesity was a disease. Well, now that we have pretty good cures for it, it's pretty proven to be a disease, right? And so, and how did we determine obesity was a disease? We looked at statistical norms. Giant violation of historical statistical norms suggests there's some sort of nosological process. And so this particular one, of course, caught my eye, and I'm like, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah, I think the whole distinction problem, I think that many people that play in this game from the theist side, they have a serious problem with distinction because we only make distinctions that are relative to us to the degree that we want to make a distinction. But there is an infinite problem of distinctions. And the reason I'm saying that is you can take something and say, well, there's 100 fruit in that bowl and everything fits the category of fruit that's inside of the bowl. And then we can look inside of the bowl and say, well, 20 of these are apples. And then we can look at the 20 apples and we can say, well, I care about stems. So, 5 of these have stems, the rest of them don't have stems, and then we can throw those out. And you can get this all the way down, and you can literally put an infinite amount of apples there, and you can even get a distinction all the way down to the atomic level. And even when you have the exact same atoms in there, you have atoms that are decaying at different rates. So there's always a distinction between this and that, infinitely. There's just always a distinction. But the problem is, like, we only go as far as the distinction is pragmatic to us.
Yes.
That's the end of the distinction.
Right.
That is
Just like the explanation, right? We judge what's important to us, and that's what leads to our ontology and our when we slice something to give it an identity, that's because it has a psychological whole.
Yeah.
What's hilarious is like culture changes and the words it becomes necessary to make more distinctions in certain cultures.
Yes.
And there's a word actually in Leviticus that says oph in the Hebrew, which translates as a thing that flies, and the KJV translates it as bird. So in the Leviticus text, it looks like when they categorize a bat, they say that a bat is a bird. But they didn't have a distinction in the taxonomy of.
Yeah, it was just flying things.
Yeah, language is infinitely flexible and combinatorial.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So that's a problem. It looks like now, there's a contradiction. Well, there's not a contradiction. There was only the problem that they didn't need that distinction, and now we have a taxonomical distinction. And you get the same thing with the word star. The word that we had, I think it's. Kosov or something with a star, like they only thought of things as stars. So when they say a star fell to the ground, people say, they called comets and other things like it's all one word. They just didn't have distinction.
This goes back to Wittgenstein's language games argument. It's
absolutely
mixed with pragmatism and all these other things. The thing that triage is really hitting, and I'm glad you brought this up. My friend that I just now met. What is your name again? I'm so sorry. Robert, I know. Robin, I know Simon is.
Okay. Kurt.
I'm
Robert and Kurt.
Kurt. Okay, yeah. So the probability, triage is not offering a probability or what they call all things considered best explanation within that field. It's claiming that necessity that I was talking about. So but many of these transitions don't deductively follow unless the controversial definitions that we're about to get into are granted. Right. And so you're about to encounter a lot of these controversial definitions. And that's where the validity is being danced around. Just because we place things into syllogistic structures doesn't mean it's valid, and of course that doesn't mean it's sound. And so a lot of this basically with no probability arguments whatsoever, when you claim necessity at that level, you had better be sure.
Well, the thing that stuck in my urethra was this every definition. Because
yes.
that is just definitely wrong. And I use the word definite quite clearly there.
Yeah.
Because colors actually vary substantially from language to language. And there are plenty of languages on Earth to this day that don't distinguish between blue and green.
Yes.
So how is it possible that every definition is going to be like collapsed and like not have validity when something as objectively like provable as wavelength distances?
Yeah, he's going to have to prove
have a word for it.
Yeah, he's going to have to prove that ultimate Archimedean lever point for language being an absolute, and that's going to be incredibly difficult. So
yeah, you have older cultures that when you check to see how many colors they thought was in the rainbow, you're going to have a variation in colors. Like you're going to have a variation in count. Some cultures might say 5, some might say 7, some might say 8. But
some
it really
might
depends
just
on
say
where
Rob G instead of Roy G. Biv.
Roy G. Biv, yeah.
There you go. Okay. So let me just back up on atheism's own terms following the collapse simultaneously into mere convention. The distinction between imagination and empirical data, the distinction between health and disease, the distinction between crime and non-crime, the distinction between truth and falsehood, the distinction between meaning and noise, every taxa, every definition, every category carrying genuine obligatory normative weight.
I still want to know what genuine means. It's a really hard word.
Obligatory normative weight. Let's just say that. Yeah, like I mean, for me again, these are all kind of, I guess, P not P statements.
Yeah.
So
and if I grant the law of non-contradiction, right, then obviously I'm not going to be able to ground it in anything other than the laws of logic. And even then, I wouldn't grant them as absolutes, certainly not the law of non-contradiction.
So I think,
as there are worldviews out there,
indeed, dialetheism and paraconsistent logic and many different deviant logics.
Yeah, which do reject the classification of the law of non-contradiction as being true. And they don't. Some say they're false. Some say there could be such things, and they give the liar paradox as an example of a potential statement that a proposition that breaks the law of non-contradiction.
Sorry,
or at least has doubt. Go ahead.
Yeah,
if you accept the truth of the Bible, a Cretan telling you that you're a nice person would be a contradiction.
I would like to say that like they contradict themselves a lot. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, whatever, whether the Bible has contradictions or not. I mean, I think that is an attempt at the liar paradox. The Cretan, right? A Cretan told me all Cretans are liars is a form of the liar paradox.
Right. Exactly.
And the fact that Paul, I think it's Paul in time.
It is Paul. Well, it's actually pseudo Paul. It's titled.
Pseudo Paul says in 110 says that he thinks it's true that Cretans are liars. So I mean that would show you that it's misunderstood at best. And if it's misunderstood, that probably means it's not true strictly or not provably true by deduction, unless you take it to be true, in which case you're just begging the question. Okay.
I wanted to say one more thing on this subject. The idea that on atheism's own term, the following collapses, all of these things collapse. Like these things aren't held up by atheism or by God to start with. It seems quite obvious to me that they're in virtue of our care for the distinction. You could easily say on a disconcern for the distinction, these things collapse. But so if I don't care if the one apple has a stem or doesn't have a stem, then that's not what I define an apple by. So as long as I say an apple is, and I have that broad category, then that's just that that's what the apple is to the degree that we're agreeing on the category. If we make a slight adjustment in the apple and the majority of the people are like, I don't know if that's an apple anymore. Okay, then that's what's just balancing the category. The collective group, whether they care about the distinction or not, in that case, as far as the definitions. But as far as every distinction, it only collapses when we don't care about the distinction, in the same way that culture said, let's just call everything, whether it's taxonomically a bird or a bat, let's just call it the same. They didn't care. So therefore, those distinctions collapse.
Robert's right. Like it only really becomes a paradox in logical isolation at the meta, like relations between ideas, non-Humean. And so there's layers to it. And so the paradox disappears whenever you go into the problem that Robert was describing.
And again, I think that the force and vivacity of the impressions versus that of the ideas is certainly a very good distinction between imagination and empirical data.
I'd also mention as well about, there is I mean, this has been well said by many people, but when you're looking at apples in a bowl, right? If you're far enough away, one of them might be a peach. So you can't know this, right? This is a potential Gettier problem, isn't it? Right. So when we say we know the distinction, well, what do you know exactly? How is knowledge being justified? We don't have access to what is truth in the JTB justification. JTB definition.
Most of these paradoxes dissolve under layered analysis because these, like A and A, we live in a dynamic existence where we can't take a snapshot where A is always A. And so a lot of these relations between ideas, you know what I mean? Like that's why dialetheism and things like that can still be considered, even though explosion can be the case as well. And so that's a lot of this falls down to, I'm going to stare at a snapshot of a relation between ideas that may not map onto anything, because we can have math for things that don't exist. And so it becomes a basically snapshot metaphysics. It becomes, okay, well, there's a paradox here. This must mean that it is absolute. Not always, and not most of the time, honestly.
Okay. So every category carrying genuine obligatory normative weight. I mean, yeah, I don't know about that.
Hey, I wanted just one more little limerick to throw in there.
It's that there is some fallibility baked into all of these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, the one that I wanted to throw in is the distinction of a pen. When does a pen not become a pen? If you ask a person like, what is a pen? They might have some idea of what a pen is. And then you could throw a quill in there and say, well, is a quill a pen?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still a pen, right? But then you could do this. What are they making? What are they connecting that makes it a pen? And it might be the ink. So let's say it's the ink and it's that viscosity of the ink and whatnot. Then the question is, how hard or how viscal can the ink get before it's no longer a pen? Like it becomes more of a waxy like thing. And they say, oh, well, there's this viscosity transition that at some point somebody's going to say, I don't think that's a pen anymore. But others might have a different point in the viscosity where they'll let go of it being a pen.
Yeah, this goes back to
the Socrates paradox. But,
goes back to Kant and identity, and a thing must be itself, and different verifications of that. And then it just becomes a language game again.
Yeah.
There's a deeper problem. There's a deeper problem here, and that is problem. How is that going to have like normative obligatory weight under this system? How do we define like convenience terms like problem or conundrum?
That is an issue, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to P3. On 1.2, argument 1.2. These do not collapse independently or sequentially. They collapse together from the same inability to ground NBF. Thomas,
yeah, this is another need for ultimate NBF grounding, where we don't have any demonstration or philosophical argumentation or logical syllogism, in which we need an ultimate grounding for NBF. So this is a plain hardcore assumption to start this entire syllogistic line of reasoning. That is a problem.
Okay, so we have mentioned that one before, and I dare say we will mention the grounding problem before again. Atheism does not merely fail to define itself. I don't know what that means either. It fails to sustain the coherence of any intelligible distinction, category,
I would say it doesn't
or definition.
define itself.
This goes back to the exact thing. Atheism is not a meta-ethical worldview nor a meta-normative worldview. It is literally just a subcategory of like belief structure. So
It's the noun form of an adjective. Like it does nothing. It's
Okay.
causally inert.
Atheism does not just consume itself; it consumes all intelligibility, reality simultaneously. I just want to make this one point quickly, which is when we were using the word atheism earlier, we were kind of substituting it to be charitable with all non-Christian God worldviews. Okay, and so I think that that's important. And if you change this now to be all let me just see if this was the same argument. Yeah, atheism itself cannot ground MBF. Well, we know that because atheism doesn't attempt to ground anything other than its own
yes,
itself, right?
yeah. The
I
issue
just want to
is
say atheism can't do any of this either. Okay, you pick on atheists like atheism can't ground these things. Okay,
that is based on the same. Yeah, you can use the great chicken. The great chicken. It doesn't matter.
I believe in fairies, Robert.
Oh no.
Okay.
Well,
How else are you going to get to Shetland?
Say again what you were going to say, please, Thomas.
No, I was just going to say, in general, the big problem with Christians most of the time, whenever they do make the transcendental argument for God's existence, the transcendental argument itself is just a philosophical argument. It's asking what can be true, what must be true as that grounding for some undeniable or indispensable phenomena to be possible in the first place. It's more about modality and necessity in its essence, rather than about God. And so we're looking for a metaphysical grounding for normativity. We don't even really have to include divination or God or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think most of it hangs on the impossibility of the contrary anyway.
Yeah, counterfactual obsession, yeah.
Which is about the then statement anyway. It's not about the if God. It's about the then such and such.
Right.
Must be true, you know. Anyway, so also, if we now change, sorry, go ahead. Was it you, Robert?
Yeah, it's me.
Okay.
I just also like to point out that the fact that he thinks this is an argument that atheists will listen to, read, and understand is a bit of a tell. He obviously thinks they're capable of doing all that, and that their taxa and their words and their definitions are going to be useful and able to be ported into this. So,
it does seem to be like attempting to attack atheism in a sense. Maybe not attack is the right word, but I know what you mean.
No, it's attack.
Yeah, might as well say it. Might as well say it.
But he's saying we can't ground or understand anything, and yet here he is giving us an argument.
Technically, a Christian could disagree with him on the grounding on this. You know what I mean? Because we don't have to necessarily speak about any divine source of metaphysical grounding. So.
Yeah, I don't think that Christianity should use precept. It's terrible argument for Christianity.
It's a hard one. Grounding really is X is true in virtue of Y, and then making a correlation between why X is true because of its correlation with Y. I mean, so
yeah, they want that absolute one though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we change this atheism word now for the same word we used in the premise, which we did in order to try and make sense of this, right? Because we recognize that atheism is not claiming to ground MBF, but something like some other worldview than the Christian God cannot ground MBF. So that was the kind of charity that we extended. But if we do it here in the conclusion, some other worldview other than the Christian God does not merely fail to define itself, it fails to sustain the coherence or intelligibility distinction, category or definition. Any non-world view other than the Christian God does not just consume itself, it consumes all intelligibility, reality simultaneously. So obviously we would need further arguments for that because that's probably a non sequitur.
You would need some bridges because in ethics the selected effects accounts provide that major naturalistic alternative, and to just deny that is an enormous alternative. I mean, whether or not those naturalistic alternatives ultimately solve moral normativity, it literally is just like burying your head in the sand kind of thing. Be like, no, don't worry about that. You know.
But I mean, you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
this all the time in like preschools and kindergartens where kids will be wanting to use the sandbox and they'll tell the other kid, I want to use the sandbox. The kid will say, what normative binding force do you have for establishing that tax?
Right.
Okay. Okay. Significance for thin, thick seam. I'm not sure exactly what this is, but I'm going to read it anyway. Thin epistemic distinctions, imagination versus empirical data, and thick moral distinction, assault versus accidents, collapse together from the same cause and are restored by the same ground. They share the same existential fate. What sustains one sustains both. What destroys one destroys both. This is the bridge. The thick, thin seam needed. Not formal analytic identity of structure, but demonstrated shared existential dependence on one ground.
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody understand the difference between thick and thin?
Yes. I was about to explain that if nobody knew what it was. So
I don't. No, please give
Please
us
do.
So murder and thieving are thick terms. Killing and taking are thin terms. So a thick term is one that has a judgment bound into it, right? Like a benevolence or a philanthropy. Those all carry a moral component as well as the act of giving.
mm-hmm. Thin is more just like good, bad, right, wrong, and ought. Just the basics, and then of course the thick is exactly as he said.
So the general is the thin, and the thick is
So
the,
Relatively
so
speaking,
what's
yes.
what's the thick term for not keeping the Sabbath? Like, is there a word for people who don't?
Selfish, maybe? I don't know.
lazy. I'm guessing.
Oh no! Do you not know this?
No, there's not a term. I mean, you could.
There is. You
Okay,
didn't grow
tell
up
me.
keeping the
All right.
Sabbath. It's Sabbath breaking.
I guess not. Sabbath breaking. Okay.
Is he saying that a thin
Obviously,
distinction-
only one person on this panel grew up keeping the Sabbath.
But that's similar to saying killing, not like it doesn't have
Sabbath
an
breaking is
implied wrong.
inherently immoral if you're a Sabbath keeper.
Seventh Day Adventist here, y'all.
Yeah, so are we saying that, is he saying imagination versus empirical data is a thin distinction? And the thick moral distinction, assault versus accident.
Mm.
Is that right? So they're saying that they both collapse together.
The way he
from
uses
the same
language, I wouldn't
cause
want to
and are
assume too
restored by
much. Yeah, the way that I've read this whole thing and how he uses language, I have to be very careful about what I assume that he means.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I don't
fair
know
enough.
entirely. Yeah.
This bridge, the thick thin seem needed, not formal analytic identity of structure, but demonstrated shared existential dependence on one ground. Existential, because I'm going to dissect that existential dependence on one ground. I mean, I'm assuming it means grounding.
When he
One
says
grounding.
one ground, I have a feeling he doesn't know what grounding is. I don't know why I have that. Like anything that is made so in virtue of. So I don't know what he's talking about. All these things being dependent on one ground. Like different things are made true in virtue of different things.
He's probing for that absolute grounding, which we cannot even show, even through language, it is even conceivable or, yeah. So.
Can we make the text larger? Yes, I will, John. Foundations are simply accepted and assumed infallible. They are tested through both use and abstraction. An honest inspection of them requires a critical and a willingness to let them go when they crack. Okay, thank you. I'm into the anti-theism. Okay, and make the text larger. Yeah, okay, no problem.
Well, the fact that the fact that he's saying that we can't ground that the normativity or whatever in this doesn't make these categories disappear. Like it's so weird that like he wants to just like collapse all the categories because he thinks we can't like.
Yeah, we still have a distinction of the categories as they're pragmatic to us. There's still even a distinction between coffee and tea to the degree that it's practical to us.
Yep.
The sad part is that we are dealing with a non-probabilistic argument. Therefore, if we're claiming necessity and absolute syllogistic pressure, he's going to always be hit on these things we're talking about with pragmatism. Always, that spear is always going to be shoved in there. So
yeah, and I've always been frustrated by both the historical development and the like individual development. But if you focus on the individual development, that you don't get into arguments about Adam and Eve with these people. So I usually just use the individual, and the point is that an infant has no categories. Like an infant is born, they have a fully functioning human brain, but they don't have categories or anything. They claw those categories out of their existence over the first, 2 to 5 years of their life. And the thing is that we don't have autobiography of that process. We don't remember it at all. So our memory starts with these fully formed words and categories that we practiced for years before we actually knew how to use them. And we don't have any idea how they're constructed.
Yeah, they have logical categories, but you're right. In terms of like any linguistic or identification standards as categories, no.
Yes, but what makes the essence of a horse? What is its horsiness? How do we know that it is horseness? And
it's not a zebra. It's not a zebra.
Right. It's weird because we could do this. Like they have different horse species that are they're closer to one another. One of the horse species might be closer to what we would call a pony than other species of horses genetically, but we will still say, these are all in the set that are horses, but this is in a set that is pony. And the only reason that we're making that distinction is because it's not big enough as the other ones. And practically we're thinking, a horse really needs to be able to pull something, but the pony, it can't pull anything. So we make a different category for it just based on size. But as far as that one horse being related to another horse genetically, many of the horses might be closer to the pony than other horses.
Well, there's miniature horses that are actually horses that are not ponies.
This is a big argued thing in metaphysics, of course, in the philosophy of identity, when they talk about the problem of universals, redness, hoarseness. These, many nominalists, and most of them say, okay, well, this is a pointless thing to absolutely nail down, because those universals could be technically applied to anything.
Chairness.
Great deal of hoarseness.
I love that we say universal even when we use terms like universal, and what we really mean is just almost
Good point. Okay.
Universal meaning on the earth in one of like 2 trillion galaxies.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a lot more than that, but yes. Okay. So the leg sweep, which I guess is some reference to like wrestling or something, I guess. I don't know. MMA.
You just love sports.
Yeah, it's to cut people's ground out from under them is the goal here.
Good. Okay. P1. Any demand that an alternative theory be seriously considered treats the evaluation of claims as normatively binding. It issues a genuine ought about how rational minds should engage alternatives. Any demand? I mean,
possible, philosophically possible, but yet again, like logical necessity does not entail exactness. So,
yeah. Also, I mean, I think treats any evaluation of claims as normative. Any demand that an alternative be seriously considered.
He's missing some commas here, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Seriously considered. I mean, I guess so. I wouldn't really have too much of a problem with that premise.
Yeah, it's possible.
And I certainly issues a genuine ought about how rational minds should engage alternatives. I'd agree with that as well. Yeah, like, if you're using the laws of logic, then if you use them incorrectly, then you're just being irrational in some sense. If you make a deductive argument which is invalid and hold to it as being true, based on that argument, then that's a sign of irrationality, I guess. So
the only thing
genuine doesn't belong here.
About here would be genuine ought. I mean, like there are many claims out there, and like I just may not feel like bothering with one day, and I don't feel like I'm obligated to bother with the ones that I don't want to. So I don't know how genuine any of these oughts would be, even if I were willing to grant that it's possible this thing is true, but it doesn't pique my interest.
Yeah, we're all in a simulation. It's possible. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do to solidify that.
Yep, this is why NBF is such a huge argument. Exactly what Kurt just said in scholarly philosophy.
Yeah, okay. So I think it's a redundant term, genuine here. Ought is just enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've already
general.
said if it be seriously considered, right? So I think that kind of defeats what you just said there, Kurt, in terms of I might not mind or I might not care. Yeah, then if you don't care, you're not seriously considering it, right? By definition. So I think
Right,
this is
but
just
who's making the demand here? Who's the demander?
Mm-hmm.
any demand that an alternative be seriously considered.
So the
Right.
person putting forward the idea as the demand.
Yeah, we're about to start getting in this argument
Yeah,
to the
that's a good
to
point. That's a
the
good point.
contentious new terminology that has been made.
Yeah, like okay, fair enough. But I think what's meant by this sentence to be steelman it is that if someone gives you an argument and you seriously consider it, then you ought to be rational when you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the basic idea here.
If it's that, sure.
Yeah. So there's a couple of words which are just redundant, as you say, like genuine. It's just redundant in that particular thing. Maybe the binding is as well.
There
But
are some
okay,
philosophers who
fair
would
enough.
argue that we ought to be rational, but that's going to be a very small few of them. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but the fact he's saying seriously consider just means that
Right.
you're
See,
not
that's
just
good enough. Yeah, good enough qualifier.
yeah. Okay. P2. That demand cannot be made without normative binding force already operative. I mean, that is the justification. The justification here on the
Mm-hmm.
grounding is that it is seriously considered,
Mm-hmm.
and
He's
then
making the
so
claim that we're attempting to prove, which is the Descartes problem, right?
yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. I
Can I
agree.
just imagine two couples trying to figure out where to go to dinner and they can't agree, or one of them doesn't want Chinese and the other one really does. I don't know that requires any genuine normative binding force to come to that conclusion, even seriously considering alternate theories.
I would love to see this changed just slightly. Instead of normative binding force, caring about the subject. So the demand cannot be made without genuine caring about the subject at hand.
Yeah, so that kind of jumps down a meta layer, because on the normative binding force, and not really correcting you, just in general, normative binding force is the authoritativeness rather than the preference. It's a level above.
The apparent of authoritativeness, though.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and so whether you feel about it or not is what Kirk was bringing up about the very nature of what is normatively binding in terms of what has the force, like the argument between the two people.
Yeah, because both couples are hungry and both ought to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And they both agree they ought to eat something.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have a conflict about whether to go to Mexican or Chinese. And then that's does that have to have normative binding force, or can you just come to a shared negotiated settlement and that still will be good enough?
Their reason giving for what that ought is, why they would eat, would have normative binding force based on their biology and everything else. But in terms of the communication, the interpersonal communication, that's a layer below that you could just say, I don't give a shit.
Yeah. Well, also, is if one of them says Mexican and the other says Chinese, is one of them wrong? I mean, irrational.
Not necessarily, no.
That's one of the conclusions based on this argument.
Yes,
I would
clearly,
say.
Mexican over Chinese, that's irrational.
Wait, Robert.
I knew I would strike somebody. I didn't know it'd be you, Kurt.
So that demand cannot be made without generative normative binding force. So, someone's wrong. But anyway, every critic who demands triage consider alternatives has already deployed normative architecture triage establishes. The demand confirms the conclusion in the act of making it. I mean, is that invalid? Because it's not in.
Are there people who are out there demanding that he consider an alternative?
Yet again, philosophically possible, but not absolute. So a lot of these are hinging on the possibility of them. So
yeah,
well, I want to be clear.
Sorry. Let me just get this straight, Thomas. So the conclusion demands on the necessity of everybody accepting normative binding force.
Technically, that's philosophically possible, but I don't know about plausibility. We would have to go through a lot more argumentation to see why that was the case, but I'm willing to grant it right now, I guess.
But again, it's saying every critic who demands triage consider alternatives has already deployed the normative. I mean, do we care? I mean,
I don't know, because it's implying its own argument, so I'm not sure. I don't know. I would say
So
possibly.
Thomas, I'm just going to ask you, have you read Frankfurt's The Importance of What We Care About? Because it sounds like you're pretty knowledgeable in this area.
Well, not entirely, but yes, I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so you're familiar with this, like, orders of desire. And so I think like that really is the closest you're going to get to a solution here, is that you're going to have like first order impulses, and then you'll have second order desires to either be concordant with or discordant with, and then there are societal third and like all the way up to nth level desires that get codified over time. And I just feel like that's more than adequate to, at least in practical terms, solve this issue. But I'll go further. Like, I don't think it matters that a given person is using this framework to like comply with things. Like, that would be fine. Like, I wouldn't demand that someone who's holding to triage like stop holding to triage. It feels like triage is there trying to tell me I have to use triage.
Yes.
And like I'm fine with them using it. I'm just like not convinced, really.
Oh yeah. But basically, like I said, the top part of this argument is like, yes, philosophically possible, and then we start getting into the later stuff, and you're like, wait a second. So I mean, I read this over earlier, and I was like, oh, okay. So like, the normative binding force is a really serious argument. We can't. The logic and belief structures are technically normatively binding, and so is justification, truth, and belief itself, based on standardized norms. And so even if it's based in biology, testability, all these other things, it's still normative binding force applies at the philosophical level. But you said the right word: practicality. Nobody has to use this kind of argumentation to make a normative claim or an ought claim. So
also, we don't have to accept every part of the triage. Is like a, what do they call them when they? God, I can't remember. I can't think of the word right now. But triage means all of the letters mean something individually, and we don't have to accept all of the triage arguments in order to, even if we accept normative binding force. Yeah. So it doesn't follow. I think it's a non.
Yes, it starts super vague and then says, "We know this vague thing, so I'm going to start narrowing in from here."
Yeah. So I think that we could just accept one or two of the parts of triage, right, and still have an atheist worldview. Or
nothing besides the atheism stuff that you've read off so far is like horribly contentious in philosophy. Most people would be like, okay, I'll grant that. But then once we start getting past the meta layer and we start getting to the new words that you're about to come up to, I won't give it away just yet, but that's when we start being like, wait a second, and that's a lot of philosophically coherent systems go this way. They'll find the most vague meta layer that makes sense at pretty much any outlet, if you want to say that, and then they start diving in, and that's when necessity starts getting harder and harder and harder to prove. So
yeah, okay, let's move on then. That's good. S 1.4, the allegiance of assent. Again, okay, near transcendental. We haven't even got out of the transcendental yet, or near transcendental, or merely not transcendental, whichever way you want to phrase it. Observable starting point. Rational agents correct known error, refuse known falsehood, and treat deliberate refusal of truth as truth, treat deliberate refusal of truth, of known truth, as genuine epistemic failure, not merely a different preference.
Okay,
I have
that's like his definition of a rational agent. It's all this that seems to be the case.
It's truth rational argument for God's existence. Oh wait, truth rational imperative argument for God's existence. TRIAGE.
Sorry.
Truth rational imperative argument for God's existence.
It's probably
Oh, I
just
see.
true rational, not true.
Yeah.
Truth,
True
rational, imperative argument.
I
Yep.
hate when they throw the word true in anything.
Yeah. Truth. You capital T. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
Capital
I
T,
don't know how we
like a
could have
cross.
I don't know how we could have epistemic access to capital T truth, but
That's
it's
the
just
thing, is that
my
it
philosophical
it
position.
means capable of rational responsiveness, not perfectly rational. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Rational agents. Let me read this again because I think I butchered it then. Rational agents correct known error, refuse known falsehood, and treat deliberate refusal of known truth as genuine epistemic failure, not merely a different preference.
Hmm.
I mean, okay. Yeah, I mean, correct.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I
disagree
mean,
a tiny bit
I
here.
don't think. Sorry. Yeah, I don't think this part here, correct known error, as best as can be done, right? We can't know truth, so potentially, in fact, I hate to say this, but Gödel's incompleteness theory says that there are truths that we can't know.
Within mathematical axiomatic systems.
Correct.
Yes. Oh,
So,
any
yeah.
functional system, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, in this instance, triage basically is just saying a rational agent is identified, it's identifying rational agents as the beings supposedly subject to epistemic norms themselves. But merely defining an agent as rational does not establish that those norms possess objective moral authority. That's one of the biggest
Well,
issues.
Thank you. Yeah,
and
thank you.
the idea that error correction itself is central in and using reason within error correction is a problem too. We know from the physiology of perception, especially as it relates to hearing and vision, that error correction takes place from the very beginning of the perception, long before anything is ever presented to an agent.
Mhm.
So that the agent is not getting the clear percept. The agent is getting an already error corrected perception prior to being able to analyze. So error correction may continue after the agent gets the perception, but error correction has already taken place before any perception is going on.
That's true. Neuroscientifically, we are prediction engines based in predictive processing, and we go based on priors, and we reconstruct in the moment based on reward and what is that called? Dopamine and serotonin. I can't remember the reward and what's the other word? God, that is just slipping my mind.
So dopamine is actually an expectation
error. My bad. You literally said it and you couldn't think of it. We predict error and
there's
reward.
a distinction. Yeah, when there's a distinction between expected and observed, then that's going to kick off a dopamine response from either direction.
Yep. And we are reconstructing that in the moment based on how our memory works and how it reconstructs, and these prediction errors of prediction errors and prediction rewards, and all of that is in the moment happening then. And what you said about error correction is I agree with.
There's also something going on here in terms of it's making these absolute statements like the beginning of this rational agents correct known errors, as if this is always the case. Rather you should use a term lesser than this, like have tendency to. Otherwise, we could do the same thing with like honest men don't lie, everyone lies, therefore there are no honest men. Right? It's using this absolutely terminology, like honest men do have failures in their honesty. Rational agents do have failures. They do have failures in their rationality. So I don't like this absolute kind of vocabulary that is defining rational agents as.
Yeah.
And underneath this, I'm just like, this guy's a young Earth creationist, and he's saying this.
No idea.
Yeah, if we could define a rational agent as absolutely rational, then maybe we could test that in some way, and perhaps that would have more.
I think that's a built-in oxymoron. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm with Hume on that one.
I don't think omni-rational is a real thing.
Yeah.
Buridan's ass is a great. For anybody who doesn't know what Buridan's ass is, like pure rationality is destroyed by that.
For a long time, philosophy thought before Hume and stuff like that the rationality principle or whatever, I can't remember the exact term, but that we are rational machines and we are processing logic that way, and it's like no.
You can be rational about one thing and not be rational in the other. Like so,
You're right.
So that doesn't. We're not always rational. We can be rational.
There are many examples of people who thought they were. I'm thinking of Newton here. Who
Yeah.
Yeah.
clearly, in hindsight, were anything but completely rational. And
Hey-
Cantor, right? Cantor.
Oh yeah.
How many times did he go into a mental asylum?
Thomas.
Damasio is really key here. Damasio shows that when you're purely rational, you're actually impaired. Your passions are what keep your body safe. And
Yes.
Somebody who's purely rational without any passions is actually non-functional.
We did
Yeah.
not evolve to hold absolute logicalness because we had to update. We had to keep the organism alive tomorrow, and so it was a lot of okay. Well, shit's about to change. We need to change that absolute rationale. You know, it was never like that for us. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Thomas, when you mentioned a moment ago that they used to think that we were absolute machines. I was fixing to ask you, is this the same time when people like Renee thought that dogs and other animals were automatons?
yeah, I mean, yes, I mean in general, yes, along that same crap. Yeah, I mean, like
I hate that guy so much.
This was the
Great coordinates, but everything else was crap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this was the philosophical world for a long time. Yes, we're completely rational. When we use logic, it's completely rational. We'll be like, well, you are perceiving that and using it through many different filters. So
Yeah, mainly the fact that they think the law of non-contradiction is inviolable.
mhm.
But there we go. Okay, so yeah, known truth. So we are disagreeing with the observational starting point anyway. P1. This behavior is universal and ineliminable from rational discourse. Universal from rational discourse. I mean, I don't think that's the case because, like,
Yeah, be careful on that one.
yeah, I think you know, perhaps potentially.
If you put "I would
different-
hope" in front of that, that might be better.
It's about the language, yeah, for sure, especially in the
Yeah.
structure. Yeah.
And certainly the difference between analytic and synthetic, not analytic and synthetic, analytic and continental, right?
When I read this, I had to be like, okay, I can't automatically assume when he says universal that he means it in the same way scholarly philosophy does. I don't know, but I mean, yet again, philosophically, logically possible.
No, I mean, like
Yeah.
again, from my, I'm in medicine. There's no behavior that's universal. Period. End. Done.
Mhm.
Fair
I'm
enough.
very careful with the word universal.
Okay, P2 then. It exhibits structure of genuine obligation. That's that word genuine again. It exhibits the structure of genuine obligation, persists through recognition, generates genuine fault for violation, presses against individual preference from outside. Anybody want to take a stab at what that means?
I'm not going to absolutely try to. Yet again, his use of language.
Yeah,
I think he had a bet with someone on how many times he could get the word genuine in this article.
I just want to just say this. What does it mean? What does exhibits mean? What does the mean?
The behavior, I'm pretty sure it's
What do you mean by
Jordan,
they? What do
thank
you mean by
What do
if?
you What do you mean it?
Term it.
What do you mean exhibit? Is that
Okay,
ends in it?
Thank you for getting that. So, yeah, this universal behavior, right? So it is referring to the starting point, rational
Mhm.
agents correct for known error, which we've already had a disagreement with. In general, it means that. So it, this epistemic failure thing, genuine epistemic failure again.
I think the it represents the behavior in P1.
It persists through recognition, through non-recognition.
What he's saying is, even if you don't think he's right, he's right.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Let's just move.
Genuinely.
Non-recognition would be something like we don't care, we don't acknowledge it, that kind of stuff.
Right. Truth exists. Truth exercises genuine normative authority, which I'm assuming is just binding force, over minds, not causally influence, but genuine prescriptive force, generating real fault for deliberate violation.
Yeah, it depends
This
on the
one
criterion
drove
of
me
truth he's
nuts.
using. Yeah, it really depends on the criterion of truth he's using in this, and obviously all of us use some kind of hybrid version, but like coherence theory, correspondence, pragmatist, constructivist, there's many different types. So
Correspondence.
yeah,
I
Instinctively,
would say
everybody.
I can't think of a metaphysics where this works, right? Even on Platonism, truth, while it has an existence, is an abstracta, which means it doesn't have standing in causal relation, right?
yeah, in that sense,
Even
yes.
Platonic abstracta, they don't have causal relation. And he is ascribing it to causal influence. So he says it's not merely causal influence. He's saying there's causal influence and it has force. Well, what's the military that like works for truth? Because
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with like how they have an army and a navy.
It's about the language, yeah.
Noun form of an adjective that we use for convenience to make sentences easier to construct.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I don't know.
I guess he's saying there that it has normative binding force.
Yeah, I mean, truth does.
Yeah. So that's when he says prescriptive force, right?
No, he's saying it has authority over minds. I assume he thinks minds exist.
Yeah, for sure.
It sounds like it's causative to me, and that's
well,
like,
he's saying, he's saying it is causal as well, and I would disagree with that for sure.
right. But that's like
If
saying
he's using truth as
hang on. Under Platonism, I would disagree with that for sure. Maybe under his worldview of God, that might not be the case, but and he may be saying, look, it has genuine prescriptive force because God will send you to hell, for instance.
Oh, yeah. If he's talking about truth in this instance as the actuality of the state of affairs pushing back on us, giving us friction, and then we are binded by that normatively. We can't escape that. But truth as in terms of like propositionally and things like that, in terms of like the highest philosophical orders, I don't know.
Yeah, but if he does mean it by truth being a precondition for the existence of God, for instance, then we're back to the same issues of it being a deductive argument and having to prove or disprove all of these other philosophical worldviews before we can take this conclusion to be true on its own, just on its own, without these two things, which don't really, I don't think, they don't necessitate the conclusion of truth exercises generative normative over mind, only through the fact that we've already disagreed with the causal bit in the thing, because I don't think there's any causal mention here through premise 1 and 2. So again, it seems like the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises anyway.
Well, there's no real definition of truth in this syllogism. Like,
there's not. But we should assume correspondence in syllogism. But I do believe, because correspondence, if I'm not mistaken, is the most academically accepted.
It is in science, but in terms of philosophy, coherence was basically the main one for so long, platonically and all that stuff. So in terms, if he's just speaking in terms of coherence, it's whatever. It's whatever is logically entailing and follows.
Coherent with that structure.
Yeah. So, and we all, of course, all of us here use correspondence, coherence, and pragmatic theories of truth in sequence, because you have to have the map, the territory, and how to move through both of those. And so, but if he's just going based on map coherence, then truth can be relatively whatever he defines it as long as it logically follows from the previous syllogism.
Right, but so here's my problem with this then. So he needs a modifier there.
Oh, hang on. Here it is. Here's the modifier. Treat deliberate refusal of truth as genuine epistemic failure.
Right, but there's a modifier missing in front of known there. Right, so there's a modifier missing, and that modifier needs to be today's, because truth is constantly updating, and of course you have the pessimistic induction of the history of science that yesterday's truth is not today's truth. And what that means then is he is taking like not just a scientific realism position, but like a wildly proud scientific realism position where what we believe today must therefore always and forever be true.
Yeah, I agree. Temporal qualifiers. Yeah, definitely a temporal qualifier.
Yeah. Okay, it makes me think also that rational agents correct for known error is not such a bad phrase.
There are even true statements that are made not true in virtue of who make the statement. So I could say I am
Textual truths.
wearing a pink shirt, or you say you're wearing a pink shirt. It's not true. I say I am wearing this exact same sentence, and it is true. So the individual statements are relative to the I in the statement.
We need more definitional.
I say I'm north of you. It's true for me, but not for you.
Yeah,
but not for you. Right.
yeah. Temporal and modificational qualifiers are needed here. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
I think a much better definition of truth is required here, or a much more extensive definition of truth, rather than what's been generally given in that first sub. Well, it's not even a premise, is it? Observational starting point. Those aren't just enough, because if you want to have force, prescriptive force, other than normative binding force, which I may give you, but it's certainly not.
Yeah, he's treating that NBF as absolute. That's what he's really trying to prove. He's using the what he thinks is absolute about NBF, which is not, to prove the absolution of NBF. That is the vaguest starting point that we can do. So.
Okay. I mean, fair enough then. You know, like I if he were to give more details, then I guess, or maybe say normative binding force exercises genuine normative authority over minds, not merely causal influence, but general prescriptive force generating real fault for deliberate violation. I mean, you would agree with that if you changed truth to MBF, would you?
Yeah, I mean, in general, yeah, it does. I mean, we truth does have normative binding force in terms of the ability to move our bodies and all of these different things, and why we ought to do such to survive and continue. But we would have to tie it to biology, and a lot of this argumentation is specifically in the introspective abstract space, in the relations of ideas spaces, and that's why there's going to need to be so many different more qualifiers and modifications here for us to truly hit this at the level that it would need to be.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. That's progress, at least on that. You know, that's.
Put John's comment, the last two comments on the screen, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if I will for sure, John. Let me just see. Here we go. Sounds like he's confused himself into believe his poetic force can be generated through an accurate assessment of truth value. And then he also says, this is just a long walk to stumble into the liar's paradox. Yeah, don't accept my truth. You must be incapable of accepting truth in general. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have mentioned the liar's paradox already, so I hate to go over it again.
See, and then his simplest formulation, like, to me, is just like objectively false. I don't think everyone agrees you ought to believe what is true.
There are some philosophers who would say, why ought we be rational? Why ought we follow the truth? What if I want to die? You know, like all these different, there's many different arguments in that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you know, what do they call it? Stance dependent, isn't it?
No, I've heard people say, I have affinity for this belief and I will believe it whether it's true or not. Like, that is a thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Who's brought up the exact right terminology, independence and stance dependence. Very important in moral arguing.
Hi, Rex. Good to see you. Thank you for stopping by. I'm here just to listen to how my thinking ought to change. Hi, Simon.
Good to see you.
I love him to pieces. I don't care. It's true that Russell's teapot was purple. Someone has a purple teapot. Is that you, Skeptic? Robert?
Oh, the teapot.
Robert
I don't think
to
the
show with the
purple
teapot on the screen.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think mine had a little bit of purple on it, but there's an image that's commonly used now. But I don't think Bertrand Russell in any of his stories ever defined the color of the teapot, if I'm not mistaken. I'd be interested.
I don't think he did. No, I had a willow pattern because he's very posh in my head. But yeah, go ahead, Robin. You wanted to say something? You there, Robin?
No, I just said hi to Rex.
Oh, hi, Rex. Yeah. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. I mean, you obviously, Rex, we'd like you to go through this and come back with a response video at some point, but it's going to be a long one. I can tell you that right now. We're not even. I mean, we're not even a fifth of the way down yet. Okay, so moving on. Honest note. Truth lays claim to mind is the conclusion established here. not a premise assumed. The observable behavior is the starting point. The authority claim is what follows. So that's basically him saying, look, that last argument here, truth is what lays claim to mind.
So
So
we
I think
use
we
the
were
word
right.
observable.
I
Notice
hadn't
the
read.
word observable is in there, so that means that the five senses are at least being considered in that sentence. So
Right. And I think that's what he means by this. That's referring to this particular form argument, in which case we were right to point out that this truth here really should be changed to normative binding force, because that
yeah,
seems to be the most thing. If you want truth as an abstract, then you can't have causal. So this truth would have to be some kind of empirical truth, I guess.
yeah,
If you want it to be causal, in which case I don't think we're going to have too much to discuss on that particular point.
yeah. NBF is really just asking in simpler language, what power does an ought causally have inside of our bodies and our minds? It's a big part of
Right.
it.
Yeah, yeah. And like there is an evidential, or there is an epistemic kind of evolutionary type explanation there, right? Which
Yeah,
has nothing to do with any supernatural beings or
yeah.
anything which has I don't know.
It's
I mean,
possible
I'm guessing
yeah.
his assumption of what God is that it's a causal power,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And we're going to disagree with that because that's going to beg the question in the first place of God's existence.
Yes, and I
So,
would imagine he would jump back into the abstract and say, "Well, we don't have to bring evolution or our bodies into this kind of thing." You know what I mean? So that's where it's going to
right,
get just
tricky.
philosophical and introspective. So
Yeah. Okay.
So I wanted to
So,
mention something right quick. I just because we keep using this normative thing, like there's this binding force for the normative, and I can't get over the idea. We use terminology as all the time about moving, or we're going 20 miles an hour, or we're moving from X to Y, and all. And we used to think and talk in these terms, and now, especially at a more scientific level, we understand that we're moving 20 miles an hour relative to. We just don't mention these things because we're always talking about relative to the same object. So we're all meaning relative to the Earth. So we say we're going 20 miles an hour, and we don't feel the need to state relative to the Earth. And when we're talking about things that are normative, or that's our alt statements, like all statements are still connected to the desired outcome that we want. We just sometimes have similar desired outcomes. So we have a cluster of the same desired outcomes, and in that we can have like the shared oughts. But just because we share oughts doesn't mean that the ought is not always connected to the desired outcome. So if I say something like you ought to eat, but if you say, well, I'm trying to die, well, to that goal, you ought not eat. It doesn't do anything whatsoever. So
this
oughts
is
are
why
always
Maybe you ought to eat cyanide.
you ought to. This is why the pragmatists in the late 1800s absolutely wrecked all of introspective philosophy. They were like, guys, you know what I mean? Basically, what Robert and Kurt have been saying this whole time. Practically, yeah, no, you don't. And so that literally brought them out of the clouds and said, yeah, we can have a coherent system for Bigfoot. It doesn't matter. Let's talk about what is pragmatic in existence. You know, William James, Dewey, John Stuart Mill, all these people had basically just been dragging people out of the clouds with their coherence only frameworks.
okay, good. Let's move on then. So the authority claim is what follows. So he's basically trying to say here, truth lays claim to mind. It is the conclusion established here, not the premise assumed. The observable behavior is the starting point. The authority claim is what follows. So the observable behavior is the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess he's saying, yeah, rationality comes before the normative binding force, right? Or at least the language comes before it. And if we're thinking about Wittgenstein again,
Yes.
right? So
Technically, rationality could only be in that introspective space without a body attached to it. A lot of philosophers will argue that and say rationality is itself. Whereas, like, you know, reason giving and all of this stuff requires a body that can have five senses and observable behaviors and other people to observe behaviors about and all of these different things. So,
yeah, I was listening to another transcendentalist today, Eli Ayala.
Eli Ayala, yeah.
Yeah, and he was making a similar point about like having to accept normative force, or not normative force, because he used a different term which I can't quite recall. But you know, he was making a similar point about like behavior first, and then what follows from that is our minds react to whatever it is that he, you know, the presupposition is. But then he was saying, look, I don't use it that way. I use the, you know, the presupposition of God's existence as the imperative, right? In
Hmm.
order first, and then I rationalize
Yeah.
afterwards from, you know, a flower to, you know, the evidence for the presupposition,
Yeah.
which, you know, it sounds good and stuff, but then when you want him to make that inference, he can't make that inference.
It's another thing of the map territory distinction, because like if we go to neuroscience, we can show through theoretical biology and predictive processing that a lot of these things happen in different ways than we think. Affect happens first, and then we think, and cognition happens later. And so whereas if we're just talking about the introspective space, you may be able to make some of those arguments and interchange a few of the words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, what we pay attention to is going to be determined limbically before we have conscious access to it. So that's a big problem here. But while Rex is in the chat, if he could just answer a real quick, like yes or no question for me. By the word truth, do you mean the collective set of all true propositions, or do you mean something other than that? Like yes or no, is it the collective set of all true propositions?
Okay, so I'll read this out. Rex, because truth is prescriptive to our thoughts. Yeah, okay. I mean that's fair. I don't think anybody's version of capital T truth, you didn't put a capital T there. I don't think anybody would say that just because you know, I have my truth and you have your truth is a statement of fact in reality. That's a statement of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that that's I don't think
Well,
that's
for
I don't
an
think we're
indexical
wrecked.
truth, that's like trivial. That's trivially
Yeah,
true.
it's
For
trivially
an
true. Yeah,
indexical truth, you have yours and I have mine.
yeah,
If we're
absolutely.
jumping around inside of these frames, as in we're jumping to the map and only arguing introspectively about rationality itself, or we're jumping down to the body and saying observations, predictions, affect first, and then cognition follows. It really depends, because that's why I would say I would need a lot more detailed arena of truth. And is the body connected in this argument? Are we getting to that later? That kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so there's.
No, I can imagine that truth might, instead of being the set of all true propositions, be like a diathesis towards the utterance of only true statements, maybe something like that.
Possible.
Yeah, he could also be using truth in the same way that you know, he used truth in the previous example, where it's really meaning the non-normative binding force, right?
Sure.
I don't know. The more and more I try to look at the definitions, the more and more I think like truth in some absolute sense it doesn't exist. And the only reason that I say that is Bertrand Russell's problem of philosophy. I don't think he uses a round table, but I used a round table in an analogy, and I said the table is round, and most people could look at a table that has a round top and they'll agree, oh yes, the table is round. But that's only pragmatically the case because what we want to use of the table is the top of the table. If you look at the side of the table isn't round in any sense from there. It is round because it's that part of it is practical to us. So we say, yes, this is true. The table is round. But
when you said the table was round, I thought of
shapes.
a hemispheric table that had like a curving top to it.
Yeah.
Right,
well,
but I mean, what
hang
are
on a
we
minute, hang on a
calling the
minute,
table?
Robert,
It's
hang
a
on a minute,
circular
Robert.
flat
Hang
table,
on,
right?
Robert. What he uses several examples there, but the example or the conclusion that he's drawing is not that you look at it from the side. It's that you see either an oblate, a spheroid type, not a spheroid, elliptical shape, or a round table, and from either you can, if you can know the angle, then you would know that the ellipse is really round.
Yes,
so that
this was
his
Bertrand
point.
Russell's
And
example.
hang on.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me just say the other one. The other one was the relationship between marching soldiers, and from whichever direction you look at, number 2 is always next to number 3, right? So there's an absolute there. It doesn't matter about your view of observational view. So that's closer to the example that you should be using, I think, from Russell.
From Russell's with the table. This is why I said I use the example of a round table specifically, and that Bertrand Russell, when he did I think it was in chapter 2 of that book, and he did I think he used a square table, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't think it was a round table, but anyway, different attributes about the thing that was the case that as you looked at it at different levels, that you were building everything that was true about the table from all of your previous experiences was the basic gist of what he was getting at. But like if we're talking about, let's say, a refrigerator, just to come a totally different one, and I say that this is the front of the refrigerator or this is the side of the refrigerator, like this is only the front or the side or the top relative to the things that we're concerned with. The front of the refrigerator is the front of the refrigerator because it's most practical to us, because that's a part of it that opens. But as far as like there being a front of the refrigerator, unless the manufacturer is defining this side as the front, like we're just picking what's practical to us and we're saying that that's true from that. So when we see the round table, we say the table is round, but the table obviously isn't round in every sense that is the table. It's not round. Only the top of it that we're concerned with, because we use it and it's most practical to us, is round. So is the statement of the table is round, is this a true statement, or can we say in some sense it's a false statement?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I see what you're saying. I think that kind of misses the point Russell's making in terms of like I'm saying, it's
I know that it's missing the point of what Russell's talking about. I'm aware of that.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Because that's why I don't use that round one. I use the soldiers marching in a formation, right? Because that has this transformative identity which doesn't change, right? So that's the reason I kind of use that one. Anyway, that's besides the point. Let's just kind of move on. So again, what does truth mean? This is the second time we've asked. In terms of the syllogism before, also had a problem. If you just mean normative binding force, then that's fine. We can go on. Lane's claim to the mind. The conclusion established here is presumed observable behavior is the starting point. Yeah, I mean, I would guess so. Is it really though? I mean, you don't even need to make that. You don't even need to make that point, because we've already agreed that normative binding force is something which can be used as a tool to evaluate rationality, or with rationality to evaluate statements that are prescriptive. So, I don't think we're disputing that. Observable behavior is the starting point. Authority is what follows. The authority, meaning prescriptive claim, is what follows, which is prescriptive claim follows. Does that make sense? Does that even make sense as a sentence? The observable behavior is the starting point. The authority, right? Is authority not a normative claim?
This goes to the very argument itself of what metanormativity is attempting to do as a field in philosophy. I mean, it's basically asking, why does a consideration count at all, and what demandability and like standing in force or legitimacy does it possess? And then you jump down to normativity, and that's like, what is the norm, and how is it formulated, represented, learned, all that stuff, enforced, or changed, resisted, any of that stuff. So
yeah. So again, my answer for I think I've dealt with this with Rex. My answer was to say something. I'd like you guys to just pull me apart on this. So when I answered this question, I said, well, the authority is is justified by the wish to avoid irrationality, right? When I'm talking about deductive arguments, right? Then I want to be rational. I mean, I ought to be rational, right? Because I'm using logic, and logic says that rationality is the way you evaluate.
We would then eventually, if we went far enough down, go back to the same problem that old philosophers had, where we're absolutely rational, so we ought to be that rational. You know what I mean? So then it gets to that problem of, well, we can be mistaken and biased and psychotically hallucinate.
So there's a much more mundane example, right? So like, it's probably the case that just almost nobody would assent to the truth of the proposition pizza is good as a single food that you eat all the time, right? Nobody would say that your diet should be composed entirely of pizza.
Mm.
Yet there's a pizza place on literally every block, just about all around the world now. So obviously people have like the idea that pizza is pleasant to consume and the idea that pizza is not great for you to eat all the time. And those are constantly negotiating with one another within the actual minds of the people themselves. In other words, they're holding both the proposition that I love eating pizza and that pizza is not good for me at the same time. And they recognize one as more true than the other. And they're still like arguing amongst within themselves about which course of action to take on the basis of the two truths. Truth one, I love pizza. Truth two, pizza's not great for me. And like to me, this idea that truth lays claim to the mind, like the mind has many kinds of claims within it that are generated internally.
Yeah, the mind preferring statements and propositions that align with reality is just something that we would expect on evolutionary development. Like we
But
can make
not
better
always.
decisions. No, I agree, but we can make better decisions if the propositions that we hold are more in alignment with the reality. Just it's
Right.
easier to predict the outcomes that are going to happen if we have proper ideas about reality.
Yeah.
But there's
In that-
much
in
more
that
going
truth
on
is
than
preferred.
simply is it true? Because let's imagine a thought experiment that tomorrow we find out that wearing pants causes prostate cancer. I mean, that's not crazy. That could be true.
It's not.
Maybe
It
it's
could
true.
be.
It could be, right? So let's say we find it out. What's going to happen the next day? Everyone's going to wear pants.
Right.
No one
right.
will change in one day, even when they
No, I
and
completely
and like
agree.
it's demonstrated. It's 100% true, right?
I wouldn't.
Let's
I wouldn't. I'd wear a skirt.
yeah. People just
Me too,
Simos.
Simos.
I hope
Well,
that it turns out that prostate cancer is not caused by pants.
hey, I want to make a statement on this subject. Okay, I think
it hasn't yet.
I think it is the case, and I think it's pretty demonstrated that the temperature of the testicles, specifically if they're warmer, makes it less likely that you could bear children. It's so
And it does
whenever
increase the
you're
risk
wearing
of
pants,
scrotal cancer and
Okay.
testicular cancer. That's true.
yeah, I don't know about the cancer side of it, but I do know as far as childbearing and your sperm
Yeah,
count,
that's
like the
true.
warmer your testicles are, the less likely they produce.
Yeah. Hot tubs are bad.
So in that sense, we could say if here's an if statement, if you want to have a child, you should wear shorts more.
Yes, well, like
And stay out of a hot tub.
I had a friend, him and his wife were trying to have children, and so she had went through all the testing, and eventually they went around to him because they had tested her for fertility in every way, and they couldn't find any issues. And so he was telling me one day he was really complaining because he had to start wearing boxer shorts all the time.
Oh no.
They made him, like because he wore whitey tighties, I guess, and he had to change to boxer shorts because of that. Yeah.
Oh no. Heavens.
Everybody's thinking of Raising Arizona now, and Nicolas Cage saying she looked as fertile.
I love that movie.
Yeah, just for the record, I don't think Plato did wear pants. So there we go.
No.
Sure, he did not.
Right.
And their
okay.
prostate cancer rates were much lower back then.
Oh, correlation.
Okay, so look, moving on. Honestly, the simplest formation. Are we into? No, we're not. We got this last bit to go. The simplest
It's
formation.
just like-
Everyone. I mean, that's a big claim, right there.
Yeah.
Agrees. You ought to believe what is true. Where does the ought come from?
That's what we're asking. You know, we're asking the grammar of authority itself. That's what we're asking. And whenever Kurt and Robert bring it back down to the practical, that's how you solve this. And Kurt's right about there are many differentiated and conflicting oughts that can happen in an agent simultaneously. That is why figuring out the grammar of authority is so difficult.
Yeah, and again, I just want to point out as well that when you say true here, you put a small t truth. So I'm not happy with that. I think you mean big T truth.
Hmm.
And also, I genuinely think you actually mean normative binding force. Everyone agrees you ought to believe what is MBF.
Hmm.
MBF.
I
So
just want to.
where does that ought come from? Well, we've already said that there are many philosophical views on this. Some say it's true. If you're using correspondence theory, then it comes from reality, I guess. In terms of if you want to, if you want to have an ought, you have to have an ought in the premise, right? From Hume's, right? And
Seems like
that means that at some point you're going to be begging the question, or it's going to be circular at least, right? So I guess in that sense, that the normative claim, the normative part, is going to be some kind of, it's going to be a primitive of some sort. You're not going to be able to explain it other than saying, well, that's why we use it, is because it gives us these advantages post
that's
hoc or ad hoc.
yeah. That's actually good that you brought that up, because I thought of an example. Wittgenstein and hinge epistemology. When justification itself, why does it have normative binding force? Hinge epistemology says we don't need justification, but therefore that in itself is a justification. And so like justification is necessary as a reason giving utterance in order to move from if then this then that. And so the normative binding force of like justification, truth, belief in the ways that we would define them philosophically is the case, but like by what authority do we use that grammar?
Yeah, again, I'd just go back to the reason we use it is for the fear of being irrational.
Yes.
Otherwise, if we used anything else, we're just going to be irrational. Well, my goldfish is the reason that I use normative first.
But not everybody has the second order desire to always be rational. That's my concern with this.
It's a desire. It's what's the lawyer that says, "I want the truth." Look, this is really what grounds
You
it.
can't handle
Oh yeah,
it.
Tom Cruise.
Right, Tom Cruise. Yeah, I can't think of the name of the lawyer's name. It's Lieutenant something, Keefe or something. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it seems like this is just where it is. Like, if people want the propositions that they hold to be in most alignment with the reality, that this is just an internal desire that has been pragmatic. It's been evolutionarily beneficial, and they just have an internal desire that I want to hold as many true statements as I can and as few false statements. And to the degree that they hold that, then that's why they're seeking it. Yeah, I could say that many people have an internal desire for it, but I want to say this: any real academic statement or article that starts with or has in it "everyone agrees," that's just not.
That is a problem.
That's a problem. Everyone
because
agrees.
The moment that you and Kurt bring it back to pragmatism out of the introspective, it just starts destroying it. You know what I mean? So that's
and it's a tiny bit ableist. Like, there are people with dementia.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and just even if we did all agree, that would not show that there is some kind of personal authority that's prescribing us that we have to believe this. Like his argument is trying to make that there's a personal authority. Like, just saying that you have a reason to believe something does not mean that someone has issued a command for you to believe it.
Right. How does this align with Hebrews also, when it makes the statement in the Bible that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen? The idea that you hope for a thing to be true is somehow making that statement true. But when you hope for it to be true, it's not true, right?
Yeah.
Who knew Hebrews agreed with David Hume?
Yeah. The Hebrews passage is a big problem.
Okay, I'd just like to, I mean, we're going to round up here soon because it's been 2 hours. So I think that's probably long enough. If you guys wouldn't mind coming back maybe next week for
Absolutely.
moving on.
Thank you for inviting
Yeah,
me.
I'd really like to try and get to the anti-atheist arguments. But
there's an anti-atheist argument? Great.
Yeah, there will be, I think. As I say, we're only about a fifth of the way through, if that. So nonetheless, I'd just like to say that everyone agrees we ought to believe what is true, but then in the previous honest note here, it says the observable behavior is the starting point. Well, there are times when having access to the truth. And in those situations, in those situations, observable behavior, it can't be the starting point because we don't have time. We don't have time to generate the truth of the situation. In
Yeah.
fact, if anything, we ascribe a falsity to be true,
Yeah.
right? In
Yeah,
reality,
and
and
All of
that's
these
just
absolute, yeah,
that's pragmatic, and that's just
all of these
pragmatic.
absolute necessity arguments by deductive syllogism are going to be incredibly bearing the burden of like how, you know what I mean? That's the biggest thing is when you claim absolute necessity. I mean, like I said, you have to come with the absolute goods. And when we use language to make these syllogisms, it gets very muddy. And so, how would you perfectly form the language syllogistically to not only be valid but sound for an absolute modal necessity? It's incredibly hard. I'm not saying that this argumentation is absolutely trash. There's a lot of things that I would agree with, especially at the first part of the argument. But yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
in
my main issue really here is that this definition of truth that's being used.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get to it? Well, we got to it through this observable starting point, which doesn't have a premise conclusion, right, to get to
Mm-hmm.
it. So this is just a statement of what is to be accepted, before the before the premise comes in.
Yeah.
So in other words, we go and refuse known falsehood, right, and treat deliberate refusal of known truth as a genuine epistemic behavior. So now if we're going to just change all of these definitions of truth, right, to deliberate refusal of known truth as a genuine epistemic failure, right,
Yeah.
then of course, yeah, right, fair enough. I don't think anyone's going to disagree that if I change this version of truth, right, to
Yes.
this simple claim, right, of this is what we should do, right, as
Yeah.
rational agents, then yeah, that's fine. But bearing in mind now, rational agents means something different, right? Because when we go and plug it in down here to everyone agrees you ought to believe what is what a rational agent would do. Like I just used an example. Well, a rational agent would run away from a falsehood, right? The rustling in the bushes, right? Better to
Uh-huh.
run away than get eaten by a tiger.
yeah,
Some
that's
Okay,
wouldn't, some wouldn't
so
know. That's the issue.
it's
that's
not
the
true.
point that I don't know if you've read it, but Damasio has the book Descartes' Error, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so good on this point where he takes actual people with limbic system damage who have lost the ability to properly value or properly pay attention, and they're actually crippled by it. They can't make good decisions
Yes.
because their passions are not properly driving their body to get the right things paid attention to,
Yeah.
and they sit all day trying to figure out what to put on in the morning.
Yes. He has a lot of
Yeah,
good points.
and also just to point out that when we were here at this observable point, I think was it. Yeah, when we were here, rational agents correct known error, not a problem. Refuse known falsehoods, known falsehoods. So you have access. You're assuming access to this epistemic truth, right?
There are seemingly an
Which
infinite
in
amount of falsehoods
itself,
that we don't know. So yeah.
yeah, which in itself is problematic. There are some truths we cannot know,
Yes.
like I pointed out.
Can we give
And
our favorite lines before we wrap?
Can we give up? Yeah,
Our
definitely.
favorite lines.
No, before we do, I didn't mean just finish this up. And treat deliberate refusal of known truth as genuine epistemic failure. Not a problem. Not merely a difference preference. Again, only if what you mean by this particular truth here is capital T truth.
Mm.
All right, it doesn't follow for think something that I think is true because I have some kind of justification, or as a fallibilist, I'm not saying that I know something for certain. This only works if you take this certainty of the known truth, which we can't
Yes.
know in terms of epistemically. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
That's
not
the
possible.
difference between disposition and truth. And yeah.
If you think known is knowledge
Yes.
by the strict criteria of justified true belief, which
Mm-hmm.
I don't hold to necessarily anyway. I think that's kind of a sketchy definition for knowledge, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, there are some there are some problems in this starting point, which later come out if you then translate it into these kind of simplistic formulations. Everyone agrees you ought to believe what is true. Well, we would like to think that, right? We would like to think that, but we don't have access, right? Gettier problems, etc., say that we can't have access to it necessarily, because there's always going to be some exception where the human mind is incorrect about whatever the assumption is.
And MAGA breaks this rule.
Nah.
Where does that ought come from, right? Well, we're disagreeing that you ought believe everything that is true in the sense that you've used the same genuine definition of the word true above.
Mhm.
If you were to change this true once again to MBF, right, then that's an interesting question to ask. Everyone agrees that you ought to believe normative binding force. Where does that ought come from? Right. Well, presumably it's going to come from the normative binding force. So
Yes.
it's a kind of tautological when you put
It
it in
is
such a simple
tautological,
way.
and that's what this whole thing, even with extra syllogisms and lots more modifiers, like Kurt said, like you're still attempting to use the authority of normative binding force as if it is absolute to prove such. That's going to always be an issue. And like you said, many philosophical, well, I won't say many. There are philosophical systems that exist that would say we ought not believe truth. You know what I mean? So there's going to be argumentation that is coherent and valid. So.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. We're going to go around the channel. I think 2 hours is enough for everybody. I really do. So, I'll try and do another one next week, or maybe at the beginning of next week. Maybe we could do 2 next week, because we're not going to get through this very quickly otherwise. So it depends on everybody's timings and when everybody can make it. I'll try and include other people as well if possible, just because. So yeah, but the more people I get on, the longer it's going to take. That's my issue, really. I'm sorry to exclude some people who have great knowledge in this subject as well, but I came down to what I did. I kind of randomly picked people at first, and then I thought, right, I'm not going to have more than 5. So anyway, there we go. Look, thank you very much. That's the first part 1, Rex. I hope that helps a little bit as well. And let's start. Robin, have you got anything you'd like to say towards the end?
Yeah, well, I didn't contribute much. I'm the DEI person, like I edited. But I am glad that we haven't made it to the atheist debunking part yet, so I can continue to sin for another week. Thank
Fantastic. You. Yeah, continue to be an atheist until he's debunked you. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice. Okay, Kurt.
Yeah, so the other problem here is, of course, that this presumes we have privileged access to whether the things we believe are true or not. And I would say, having gone through a life where there were many things that I believed firmly that were true, that I now believe firmly are false, feeling that something is true is not actually a good marker that it's true. So that's a deeper problem with this whole structure, right? You don't have privileged access necessarily in the moment to what's actually true.
Okay, thank you so much. Thomas?
I really appreciate being here. I love this kind of dissection. I love all you guys being here with me. And I think that this needs to be dissected more, but in terms of, an overall argument, I think it needs a lot of work, a lot of added syllogistic structure and stuff like that. So really, thank you for letting me be here.
No, absolute pleasure to have you on. I mean, this is the first time you've been on State of the Onion.
I love it.
And I absolutely really appreciate it. As I say, hopefully you can make the next one.
I will.
And yeah, that's great. Thank you. Obviously, go subscribe to Panburn, and you can his Discord, and you can catch up with Thomas if anybody's interested in doing that. Max Michael says part 1 of 99 completed.
He knows you, Simos.
Yeah, probably. Being wrong feels exactly the same as being right. Absolutely, Robin. Okay, Robert, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to tell everybody, first of all, I'm Robert from Skeptic Philosophy on YouTube. You can check out my YouTube channel. We do shows every Sunday. Also, I wanted to mention my absolute favorite line of this entire thing that we've covered so far is the P2 that said, on atheism's own terms, the following collapses. That I just absolutely loved that term. It has given me so many giggles. I'll laugh about it the rest of the week. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you for having me on here, Summers.
Yeah, no problem. And of course, the objection being that atheism doesn't say anything about a positive claim. So how can negative claims collapse like that? But anyway, yeah, everything collapses on atheism, including God. I don't know if you're aware of that. So thank you very much for proving God doesn't exist. Anyway, right or wrong, I'm being. Yeah, absolutely. The great Peter Sellers. It reminds me of. Okay, look, thank you everybody for coming on State of the Onion. As I say, same time next Thursday, I guess, would be the likely schedule because that's when Thursday happens. And hopefully we'll make it to next Thursday and then we can say next Thursdayism. Thank you very much, everybody.